Hello and welcome to another edition of the Shadowcast. And I'm very excited to say that this week we have the French Poltergeist Part 2. And like last time, I'm joined by Lou Hotchkiss-Knives.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Dr. Hugh Pincott.
Good morning to you too.
So, just a very quick recap. Lou, could you very quickly just give us a 2-minute flavour of the sorts of things we were discussing in part 1?
So yes, this is about my best friend in France. There's poltergeist activity in her house. It's a 1930s house. It started in 1990 and it's still going on at present, although there were times when there was no manifestation. Um, Activity involves sounds, particularly knocks and rapping, movement of objects, apparition, blood, and also animal activity. It's a house in northern France. The focus of the activity was my best mate and a mother, particularly. The father was kind of peripheral. Then the animals were also affected. Quite a few of them died. And eventually that kind of calmed down in 1996, I think. And after that, it started again in the 2010s. And from now on, the focus seems to be a son who's now 11 years old.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And what I would say to our audience is if you haven't seen part 1, please have a watch of that now, because what we're about to talk about will make a lot more sense. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a list of the different phenomena that was experienced, and Lou will be interpreting how practical, how reasonable my suggestions might be to explain it in a scientific manner. So, to get things started, let's have a think about the knockings around the house. So, my thought was, could this perhaps have been pipe work? And is there any reason to believe that there was perhaps some faulty plumbing in the property?
So it's an old house. It hasn't been very well maintained. That is true. Um, Although at my parents' house we had some pipes issues, and I know the sound of it. You can hear it comes from a pipe. It's got a metallic sound to it. In her house, it was on wood, and it was always things like that kind of stuff. Yeah. Sorry, I'm using my table now.
Yes.
Uh, and on several times, several occasions, I tried to reproduce the noise. And often, I mean, there was one particular occasion when we were in this room, and the only way to get the same sound was to kind of move the cupboard from the corner of the room and knock on the back of it. Often it seemed to come from furnitures. And I know that woods can crack, but the thing is with this particular activity, there seemed to be like kind of it tended to be like several little knocks and then a big one that tended to be what was going on. And we've all had wood cracking in our houses. We know what that's like. It doesn't crack every day, so I don't know. Although I've tried to do it. It's mainly wood. It wasn't pipes.
Okay, so what I take
If
from
I could
that,
make a comment at this stage, please, Lee. As we say in scientific circles, hindsight is an exact science. And throughout the decades, certainly, if I can hardly say centuries, because we didn't have such sophisticated equipment, let's say prior to the 1950s. But several modern researchers have taken alleged poltergeist rap recordings and analyzed them to see how they compare with the sort of remanufactured knocks, if you like, that Lou has just been explaining. And it's a whole library of its own. But essentially, what they found out was that if you put it on one of these machines where you can see the waveforms, um, it was an entirely different structure. The wardrobe, when you knock on it, the sound would attenuate. That is, fade away quite slowly, which is what you might expect, I suppose, from physics and the normal distribution curve. In other words, it's a slow dying off. Here, in these poltergeist type raps, it was a very sharp staccato uh, hit, and we didn't see much of this falling off at all. So this is something to look out for. And I know it's, as I say, hindsight is exact, but I'm sure that Lou's team didn't have that sort of recording and analyzing equipment then. But still, it's something for future researchers to bear in mind.
Yeah, I think when something like that happens, you don't, you see all these ghost hunting programs, and they just go into the house and, oh, hello, there's things happening. I don't
That's
think it
right.
doesn't work like that.
No, no.
You don't know when they're going to happen. It's unpredictable. So to want to record it is, you'd be very lucky. You'd have to stay there and record 24/7. I think that's the only way to do it. So you're saying, Hugh, that the wavelength, instead of dying out, would get louder and louder, or he wouldn't present the same way.
Can't quite remember which way. I mean, it does differ a little bit each one you look at. But let's say the finishing, the cessation was sharp, sharp,
Okay.
sharp, and finish.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. I never heard this before, so that's a good thing to know.
But see, up to the minute approach you get here on these podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, let's now have a look at the specks of blood that were seen around the property. So my idea was, could this have been one or more of the animals who may have been sufficiently diseased to have blood coming from them intermittently? We know that animals were roaming the house. Is that
Mm.
a possibility?
So the animals, at the beginning, they thought it was the cat, um, because he was always on the same carpet. It was like a little, like not Bugs Bunny, but Snow White Rabbit carpet, that was on the foot of the bed. And he was always on that. And at first they thought maybe a cat came up and, had their periods or whatever, and bled on the carpet. But a mom wanted to know, so she kind of banned the animals from upstairs. And after that, after a while, he stopped being on the carpet because they removed it, and he started being on their clothes. And a mum, a parent, quite often, it was around her wrist. So he would be on her bedclothes, and there would be little dots like that, like a kind of spaced out around the wrist. That's often what they had, and they had blood on the pillow. Now, blood on the pillow, you could argue maybe they had a scratch on their face or something like that. Um, but there was one occasion when, the pendulum that used to disappear around the house, yes. It disappeared once, and the dad found it under his pillow, and there was like a ring of droplets of blood where his ear had been.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, if it had been, this is what's kind of puzzles me with this, is that if you're bleeding, you're not bleeding in droplets spaced out, aren't you, really? You're bleeding in traces, and it tends to go down rather than in
Yeah,
circular
yeah.
fashion. In the case, because I sent you a link with other cases that happen in the same area, all within 100-kilometer radius, and they happen roughly at the same time. There was the case of is it Saint-Quentin, house at Blees, and for them it was on the wall. But the traces of blood were going down like gravity would demand that they do, yeah. Um, and apparently, like they said for a while, there was human blood. It turned out that it wasn't. It's like the press made that up. They had blood on the wall, but they never found out where it came from. In my friend's case, it was never analyzed, or so we don't know to this day. She seems to think there was a correlation between the animals dying and the blood appearing on their bedclothes. But again, it's like I can only take their words for it from it. I don't know.
And could it be that the animals presenting as unwell, or more than that, actually deceased, were they coming to harm as a result of some kind of infection, maybe?
So the cats had a peritonitis. I forgot what the name is. Peritonite infectieuse. What was it called? I found the name of it in English. Yeah, it was peritonite infecciosa, uh, and that's like a that's a disease that they caught, and that was kind of horrible because they all had it one after the other. Um, then the hens seemed to die. For you just found them dead. There seemed to be no reason or rhyme because you can get like poultry disease and it manifests in particular fashions. They seem to be okay, and then you'd find them dead. Um, it wasn't foxes or anything. I mean, in France at the time, foxes were hunted quite extensively because of rabies. Because rabies was a danger when I was growing up. There was vaccination was a thing. Like people were very scared of it. Uh, and also having lived here and having had collective hens with my friends, I've seen a couple of hens eaten by foxes, and there's blood everywhere and there's feathers everywhere. So we didn't have a case of that. Uh, one of the hamsters disappeared from its cage. A bird disappeared. Now, for that, I'm thinking might be the parents, who didn't want to upset her and just discreetly buried the animal because they didn't want to upset her. That's a possibility. Uh, they never admitted to it, though, even years after. So if it was them, then, they stuck to their guns. Uh, I think the main problem with the animals is that they had loads of animals for a while and it was fine. And at the time when this started to happen, they started dying in crazy numbers. And that's the fact that the two things happened at the same time. That's what made her think that there was a correlation. I mean, it's possible that it was something, it was due to the fact that they had no money, they didn't look after them properly. But I don't know. In that particular instance, um, you know, that's the conclusion that she drew at the time.
Hugh, do you have any thoughts about the specks of blood and the animals?
Not at this point, Lee. Thank you very much. It's as much a mystery to me, this one, as to everyone.
A mystery
I mean,
indeed.
I cannot think of any cases in the literature um, which had bleeding as a primary part of the phenomenon.
See, because we had that other house that other house in the 1986 who had the same bleeding issue. So for me, I was under the impression that bleeding things in poltergeist phenomena was kind of common, but clearly you're saying that it's not.
There's obviously, like anything, there are occasions, very odd occasions. What I'm suggesting is it's not one of the fundamental things that you'd look for in
Yeah.
poltergeist activity.
Is there a data bank, like an AI thing that goes through all the cases and with like keywords, and would be used to draw like graphs or percentages of what phenomena happened overall?
Yes, there's several analysts and researchers have attempted this. I think the most comprehensive one is that of Tony Cornell and Guy Playfair, I believe. And there they analyze in quite forensic detail the sort of thing you'd be looking for. I have a copy somewhere in the library, but unfortunately I can't quite remember. But I don't recall that bleeding with any degree of profusion was part of this.
I'd love to see a database of this when you could search things by keywords, because you know it'd be interesting to see if there are other bleeding cases and how many there are and where they are, and if there are any similarities. But like you say, you don't seem to have
Yes. Sorry,
come
can I
across that
correct
anymore.
that? I think I said Guy Playfair. It was Alan Gould who was the co-author and fellow researcher. So that's Cornell and Gould.
Good to know.
Okay, let's move on to apports, to objects appearing and disappearing. Now, with my skeptic hat, I had quite a bit of trouble with this one. But I did wonder, Lou, when you were speaking about what was happening over those many years, I think that the father was conspicuous by his absence,
Yeah.
seemingly. Obviously, it would be a very cruel act for him to be instigating some of this, but
Yeah.
is that any kind of possibility?
I think the way I see it, there's two things. There's the fact that he wasn't really the focus of the activities, apart from when it came to the pendulum, because he was using the pendulum himself, because he was trying to get, to win horse races using it. I mean, he never worked. So very often he put the pendulum somewhere and they'd find it was nuts in the chain and everything. That's about the only thing. Anything like the knocks or things like that, for the whole first part of the phenomena, when the whole thing started, it was always my friends and a mom who heard it. He would sleep through the knocks and not wake up. And when he'd wake up in the morning, he'd be dismissing it because he hadn't witnessed any of it. It's only gradually that he started witnessing it. And it took him a long time to believe in it. And I remember a couple of times when my dad came to pick me up and he was just looking at my friend and saying, "You doing this, aren't you? You doing this?" And he seemed to be accusing her. And eventually he couldn't deny it anymore. But he was one of the several people who were involved with the case who who were in denial. They saw phenomena, they were confronted by them, they had to realize that, well, they had to admit that it wasn't normal. What was happening was not normal. But still, they were saying, no, no, there's got to be an explanation. No, 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 we didn't see anything. We dreamt it. And he did that until he could no longer refute the reality. But yeah, I don't think, I absolutely don't think her dad was the person behind it. He was a very nice person. He was very scatty. He didn't have a bad bone in him, really. So no. But it'd be interesting to see, Hugh, if you come across houses and cases when it was done by a member of the family to freak people out.
Yes, I have a feeling that we mentioned one last time, a fairly modern reporting one. It was in the SPR Journal, Society for Psychical Research Journal, in the last 6 months, where in a South American country, this family, it was just a gentleman and his younger wife. And it was to do with coins. The airports were all coins, and they were largely from the country concerned, which could have been Peru, but don't quote me on that. And they were. The thing is that the gentleman, was very interested in coin collecting when he was very young. So we wondered whether there was a link there. Um, and that's about all they could come up with. It's the usual sort of list of questions followed and no answers at the moment.
That's certainly a very interesting case, and it might be that we discuss that in a future podcast.
Do you have a copy of that, Lee? Did I lend that one to you?
Yes, yes.
Good. That's all right. Yeah,
in my desk at the
good.
moment.
So it must be important if Lee has it in his desk.
Right.
Yes, very much so, under lock and key, Hugh. Okay, let's move on to footsteps. So my thought was, obviously, the inhabitants of the property are already in a state of higher anxiety. Are we looking at mass hysteria here, where one person says that there are footsteps, which are in fact just ordinary sounds, and everybody else believes them because they're so anxious?
I'm really interested in mass hysteria things, and I've been reading about it recently. And it's a fascinating phenomena, really, because it's just contagious. Yes, people think they hear stuff, and everybody hears it. Or there was this fainting epidemic, and I think it's in Iran, in a school, when all the girls started fainting. And in the 60s, there was laughing epidemics in South Africa. I think it was South Africa, when they had to close whole schools because people would start laughing and they couldn't stop, and there was no reason, or rhyme for it. It's something that's really interesting, and I suppose. Do you know the story of the Strasbourg, like a dancing craze in the Middle Ages?
I have heard
No,
of that.
tell us.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, so there'd been wars and there'd been a plague and everything. And it all started with a woman dancing in the street because after a child had died, and people thought that was weird. And before you know it, people started dancing with her, and it went on for like a long time, days and days and days. And apparently, they say some people dropped of exhaustion and some people dropped dead. I mean, obviously, we don't know the insides and outside of it because it was a long time ago. Um, and I was reading that there was a similar thing in Iraq during the war when some people started dancing, and it was a reaction to trauma.
Mm.
Um, so, and yeah, there was cases more recently. So, when you're talking about them having that being a mass hysteria case, due to the fact that they were all in a hypervigilance state. I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it. No, I heard stuff and I saw stuff. So I'd say, does that put me? And I've never was scared of this. This is the thing. So, I'd say that's probably the argument that would be against mass hysteria. Uh, or, you could say maybe the state of fear creates a phenomena. I don't know. That's an interesting angle to look at. Do you think it's a situation when, when people are really in this heightened sense of fear, then that just amplifies the poltergeist activity? Because I was telling you last time that back in 2000 and something like that, 10, I think I put the date here, when my godson was supposed to go and spend the summer at his father, and he didn't want to go. And she was giving him a bath, and then a mirror broke, and the shower started on its own and everything. And it happened because they were both in a state of anxiety. And she said herself, it tends to happen when we're under stress.
Mm.
So there seems to be, even historically, a link between people being in distress and mass hysteria or phenomena. That's how I see it. What do you think, Hugh?
I certainly agree with you that stress, emotion can cause these things to happen. The problem is how we extend the argument to as a generality from one particular case. I'm not sure of that. What I am sure of is that under certain circumstances, and Lee will know as much about this as I do, under hypnosis, for example, we can get all sorts of most remarkable effects. I have to say, we haven't tried inviting our subjects to cracking mirrors as yet, but it'd be an interesting experiment for the future, Lee.
Definitely, yes. Trying to harness the strength of the worried subconscious, the panicked subconscious.
No, that's interesting. Okay, I'd like to know more about this hypnosis thing. What happened? What are you talking about?
Have I not given you a link to the report on this?
I don't believe so, no.
Right. Let me make a note of that now, and I'll see if I can dig it out, or I can get Morris to do it. Um, that's the Surdic. Yeah. Rather than take up too much time of this podcast now, essentially what we were doing was trying to replicate experiments by another member earlier than this was mid 80s, but his experiments took place earlier, and he was convinced that what he had was a whole series of previous lives, and they were most impressive, I have to say. And we were trying to replicate that. We started off with about 6 different models, starting models, as a good scientist should. And at the end of it, what we came up with from the observations, it fitted the facts of our experiment, if you like. What we observed fitted none of these models, and we had to try and invent new ones. So very, very interesting. And we did discover some fantastic attributes of the human mind, like the unlocking of latent artistic talents, which were not even suspected in the subject before.
Oh, that's really interesting then. Could you make me
Yes,
good at
that's
math?
yeah, that's that'll be in that's in the report that I shall send.
Oh, Oh, so funny. Back onto the idea of stress causing things. As you know, I'm an occultist, and I remember a few years ago being really upset about something, and I did a ritual to kind of bind somebody and stop them from hurting me. And I was, when you do magic, you've got to be calm. You've got to be like a sniper. You concentrate your intent on something. You can have emotion at first, but
Absolutely.
when you're doing the ritual, you can't start going in all directions. And unfortunately, that was one of these days when I forgot that. I got carried away. And as I finished it, a glass that was on the table of the kitchen exploded.
Brilliant
Yeah.
example.
So, I'd see it like this.
Oh, thank you, Lewis. That's something to talk about for another time, I think, there. Swinging lampshades. Lampshades
Yeah.
seem to be swinging. So my question is, do we know if the area is or was subject to minor earth tremors?
There was one when I was about 18, and uh, I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and my bed seemed to be doing this, and I could hear stuff falling from the shelves. And I kind of thought, this must be a ghost. And obviously, having a best mate who's got a poltergeist in her house. Uh, and then he stopped, and I thought, nah, it's a nightmare. Fell back asleep. Woke up in the morning, all my books were on the floor. And my mom came and said, "Did you feel the earthquake?" And I thought, oh, that's what it was. That's the only one I'm aware of uh, in the area. Um, we've had tornadoes recently and things like that because it's a very flat area. But no, that's the only time I think there was an earthquake. Um, I think we would be more like the most logical thing would be it's the wind, yeah. But uh, in her case, I don't know if you remember, I told you last time, there was one time when they went in the room upstairs, and when they opened the door, the lamp was really going, whirling really fast. And she said there was a gust of wind that made their hair fly. Uh, but the windows were closed. And that's when her mom grabbed this little, you know, vial of holy water shaped like the Virgin Mary, and she chucked it at the lamp, and the lamp stopped. Which is the only time when there was some kind of religious retaliation to the phenomena. Um, but yeah, it seemed to happen no matter, if the windows were open or closed, it was still happening. The time I was telling you about as well last time was when I was with her, and all of a sudden she was like this, she was pointing, and the lamp was whirling in the room, and I thought the light was weird, and that's when I realized why it was weird is because the lamp was moving. And that was winter, so the windows were clearly not open. That's all I can tell you, really. I mean, although there has been subterranean activity, I can't imagine that being every day.
Yes, I've mentioned the researchers Cornell and Gould in the last few minutes, and they did a very interesting experiment because earth tremors, this sort of thing, and even underground waters have been put forward as possible reasons for the sort of movement of objects alleged to be under poltergeist effect. Now, what they said to themselves, they said, look, why don't we do a house shaking experiment? Shake a house and see what happens. And they actually did this. No, they didn't use one of their own houses. What they did was very clever. They went to a local authority in the Midlands and said, "Oi, got any old houses you're knocking down? Can we borrow one for an afternoon?" And this is what they did. They borrowed one and filled it full of objects on shelves, on everything. Made sure lampshades that would swing were there. All the sort of things you could imagine. They kitted up this house, and then they connected it to a very tremulous device they'd found in a builder's yard somewhere, which was what was used actually to demolish houses. You just connected this to the wall, and the thing in and out, really, really shook it. And the shaking itself, I would have thought, would have brought a house down. But so one of them drew the short straw, I think, and offered to be inside to watch what happens. And the answer was nothing, sweet nothing. So that is a very effective experiment, I think, to indicate, it doesn't prove anything, nothing proves anything, but that would certainly indicate that underground water, no, not at all, and maybe even earth tremors will not produce the sort of effects that we are used to in poltergeist reports.
Right, because we talked about the fact there was a some water running under the street. So
Yes,
obviously
right.
that's
That
yeah, so
reminded me.
that's
Mm.
not a factor then.
Well, it doesn't appear to be. We never rule anything out entirely, of course.
That's good. That's good to know. That's interesting. I'm always really, that's really good. I like to look at all the different angles on it and what's been proven and not proven. Although,
Mm.
like you say, you can't really prove anything in situations like this. You can just observe.
Okay, let's think about the doorbell, which was producing a tune despite the fact that the visible wires had been cut.
Yeah.
Can
S-
I just ask a question there? When you say produced a tune, remind me, was it anything more musical, more melodic than what the bell itself was programmed to do?
No, it was like a ring, basically. It wasn't one of these chimes like we have now in modern times. It was a really old bell. It was from
It
the
was just
60s, I think.
it was just a monotone then, a single that ding, 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 ding,
It
ding,
was like
ding, ding.
ring, that kind of stuff, like the old
Yes,
doorbell,
yes.
basically.
But only the one note.
Yeah,
Yeah, right. Thank you.
nothing exciting really about that at all.
So that could have been a sort of completing a circuit somewhere, like an earthing effect.
Okay, so you're thinking it would be due to something in the inner mechanism,
Yes, yes,
it without
or
being linked to the mains. That would still happen because something moved, or
something
there was
like
a
that. Yes, yes.
contraction. Yeah, that makes sense actually, like contraction, because that's absolutely possible, really.
yes, I
Yeah, I
was
think
wondering if maybe there were other wires unseen within the wall that were still intact.
yes, that was not. I know that wasn't the case, but uh, I don't know. That happened a couple of times, and then it never happened again. So the fact it happened a
Yeah,
couple of times, you could say,
yeah.
yeah, that there might be an explanation for that. Absolutely. But again, it was in the context of all these things that seem to come from the past happening again. So yes, it can be totally normal or it cannot. That's a possibility.
Okay, there were vile smells.
Yes. No, this
Olfactory.
one is interesting because um we're talking about the smell in the oven, yeah. Uh,
Yes, that was one of the main ones, wasn't it? But there were others. There was a general pervading
yeah.
odour as well.
Uh, I mean, the worst one was in the kitchen. Again, that, when I was looking into it and I was talking to her about it, we were saying, well, the thing is, ovens are weird creatures. You can keep them clean and everything, and there can be some reaction to the cleaning liquid that could react with some water left in it or something like that. But I remember it was the smell of doom. It was awful. Uh, yeah, it wasn't. I'd say there were smells, but I wouldn't say that was one of the main manifestations at all. Um, and again, it's an old house. It's a bit humid, so I think you could explain that that's absolutely normal in that sense.
And could there have been a build-up of excessive mold, perhaps?
Yeah, that's absolutely possible. Again, like I said, it's quite a cold and dark house, and so, but that's the thing as well with places like that. If there's mold somewhere, that creates spores in the air. It's not good, and that can create smells as well. But it wasn't really smells of uh, the smells in the kitchen. They was just horrendous. It was awful, and it was like acrid and chemically. I don't know. It was really hard to describe. It was atrocious. Um, you tended to get smells in the place that were like more, yeah, like humidity smells, I suppose, that were quite strong in places. But the kitchen smells, it was, and
Could
again,
I
that happened at the time, and then never happened again.
could I ask you please to describe the smell in more detail in the sense that uh, was it possibly organic, like decaying food, flesh, whatever, or was it, as you just hinted, inorganic, like bleach or chemicals in small?
I would my,
Let
my
it.
first my first gut feeling was like there was something kind of chemical about it, but you can is that kind of smell? It's a bit like there was something like almost like chlorine,
Yeah, that's
uh,
what I was
but
wondering.
mixed with something disgusting and horrible. And I remember she'd put it in this bottle, and then we just smelled it, and we started going blah.
Yeah.
Uh, oh no, it was awful. But yeah, I suppose there was the bottom note, to use the perfumery term, would have been chemical, and the top note was something else, and it was awful. It was like
Ah,
mixture of vomit and God knows what. It was just the worst cocktails of smell you could think of.
right. Thank you. That's very helpful.
And
Because
Sean,
again, for that one, I'm not gonna say that's definitely ghostly. Like it could be anything.
what perhaps is ghostly are the moving shadows. So
Yeah.
I was wondering, uh, could there have been an external light from outside of the property? Uh,
So there's light in the street, uh, outside the bedroom. When this, so do you want me to recap for the spectators? Uh, so she saw this shadow in a room. Her mom saw it as well. And it moved across the four corners of the room like that, and then it went down and it kind of went to the foot of the bed. And that was one night. But she said when she saw it, she thought it was weird, so she was trying to guess where it came from, and she was thinking, could it be the reflection of this? Like, no. Could it be the reflection of that? No. And so she was asking herself that for a while until the thing started moving. And the fact that he went on the four corners of the house, that wouldn't really worked if it was a car passing, making a shadow moving. Do you know what I mean? And she said it was like a little cloud that looked 3D. So I don't know, shadows don't really look like that. And I know, and the fact her mother saw it as well, I think that's but she saw it earlier. Um, I think that when she told me that, I kind of I believed her because I know, especially since then, having seen things myself, there is a 3D quality to things like that. It's kind of hard to explain until you've seen it, really. It's a bit like often I see things like the negative of a photograph and they have a kind of solid appearance to it. And what she saw there, she said it was like a little cloud. But you can see it was not two-dimensional.
okay, certainly shadows would be two-dimensional.
Yes. Moving shadows, Hugh. How often have you come across that? Do you have any cases to tell us about? Or smoke or things like that?
Shadows.
Yeah,
Shadows.
shadows or smoke or anything like this.
There must be there, but I must admit I cannot recall an instance of that. I'm sorry.
Um, because often, occultism as well as a thing, spirits manifest as smoke.
Hmm.
Um, some people see it as smoke solidly. I tend to see other stuff. Uh, but generally, that's kind of when there's manifestation, very often you get smoke. So when she told me
Ah,
that,
you,
yeah,
you
go on.
you're probably thinking of when you say smoke, a mist,
Yeah,
like
basically, that's it. Yeah.
yes, I suppose many people when the spiritualists of old who witnessed ectoplasm or things like
Yeah,
that in the seance room, they may well have described that as a mist. So that if that can be interpreted as a smoke, then possibly so.
yeah. I mean, in her case, it was almost compact. It wasn't like a
Hmm.
a myth in the room. It was different. But yeah, what happened to ectoplasm is gone out of fashion, isn't it? No one sees ectoplasms anymore for some reason. It was a Victorian trend.
Well, no, it was no. If I may butt in and disagree slightly, it
Oh,
continued well until the late 1940s. It seemed to be what happened in the war years that put an end to it, and society became a lot more technologically inclined after that. And in the 60s and the 70s, we were far more interested in looking at spoon bending, weren't we? And tape
yeah.
recorders going wrong. It's as though the poltergeist entity, in quotes, was saying, well, look, no point in doing ectoplasm anymore. You're not interested in that. Let's go to the high-tech stuff, like bending keys.
Yeah, that's true. But even mediums nowadays, I don't know anybody who kind of says that there's ectoplasm going on
Yes.
when they're doing seances.
Mary Rose Barrington, the lady who did the book you may remember on um, the jots, just one of those things. Well, the apports that we've just been talking about, she analyzed dozens and dozens of cases of that and described them. Now, she did a lecture on precisely that topic, and it was called Whatever Happened to the Poltergeist? And if you're that interested, copies will still exist with the SPR.
If you could, in the description of the video, put a link to all these books, Lee, that would be really interesting. So our viewers can look at them for themselves, and I won't forget what their names are, and I can buy myself copies as well.
Definitely,
Yeah,
it would be good to
I'll
have
see
some
what I can
further
do.
information.
I'll draft a list of what I can think of, Liam. Send it to you.
That'd be superb.
Lovely. Thank you, Hugh. One of the more shocking occurrences in the poltergeist case was the floating hand at the window.
Oh gosh. She said it's the most terrifying thing that she's ever seen in her life, and she hopes she never sees that again.
Could this have been somebody attempting to burgle the property?
So I sent you a photo of the house, didn't I? Uh,
Yes.
so you can see at the front. I mean, I'm not going to show it to the camera because we don't want to keep anonymous, but uh, you can see what it's like. So um, the window I'm talking about is the one that's the first one on the left on the top floor.
So
So
it's easy to scale that wall.
you would, if you wanted to burgle a house, you wouldn't use that window, put it this way, not in the middle of the afternoon. You'd use the garage door, or you'd go in through the garden and you'd use the back door. But at lunchtime or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, climbing a top floor window with full view on the street, that's not, especially when you think there's nothing really to climb onto. So if you have to be Spider-Man, and probably not with a good good strategies to burgle people.
No, it's for a very bad burglar.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
what I found interesting with this is uh, the 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 daughter saw this, and
yes.
then after telling the mother experienced it as well. Could this be suggestion of some sort?
This is a good important I think point is that uh, her and her mom were extremely close, and her and her mom from the beginning saw the things. So often the pattern was that my friend would experience something, then her mom would experience it. It was not often the other way around. Um, but that day, her mom said, "Look, no, you didn't see that. That's too crazy. It's just because you're under stress." And at first, her mom was like, "No, go to see your friends. Don't think about it. It's you've just dreamt that." And then she saw it herself. But the way the mom saw it was that he was holding the doorknob of the window for the knob of the window. But she said he was cut at the wrist. Like all she could see was that bit. Um, yeah, is it suggestion or is it because they're both the focus of it? Because when you look at the second part of the manifestations, you still have that child mother pattern and this time it's exactly the same way. My godson sees something and then she'll see something similar or experience something similar. So it seems to come in both cases from the younger person.
Okay, that's interesting.
Lee, sorry,
Go
what I
go
was
for
going
it.
to, what I was going to suggest was, Lee, you will have reports of something similar from our own area, and I'm talking about the hairy hands of Dartmoor. In just
Yes.
a couple of minutes, or 1 minute perhaps, you can tell the viewers about this.
Yes, the hairy hands. So the story goes that there's a section of road between the two bridges and Post Bridge where there is, I suppose you could call it an adverse camber. The road rolls from one side to the other, which I think explains the accidents that have been there. But there was a story whereby a person was driving their car, and all of a sudden, these hairy hands gripped their steering wheel, forcing them off the road. Now, one hypothesis is that this is the spirit of an Italian gentleman who was involved in an explosion. He died at a nearby munitions factory. But of course, with Dartmoor legends, it's Chinese whispers, and stories inevitably become embellished. But that's certainly an example of possible suggestion where you have a story that's established, and then when subsequently things happen in that area, it's blamed on the story. It must be the
Yeah.
thing.
Hello. Sorry, the cat decided to
Hello.
play us a tune. Just appeared out of nowhere. Um, It's funny you mentioned that because my godson, I showed him a kind of photo that I found online of the hairy hands, and he had
Oh,
nightmares about it. He was completely traumatized.
oh
It was just
dear.
an AI kind of, manufactured thing to illustrate the story on a website. And he was traumatized. He said it was the most horrible thing he'd ever seen. I'd heard that it started in the 20s with a dad who was on a motorbike with two of his kids, and he had an accident and he went off the road. And the theory was that he was drunk, and so that was his excuse for going off the road. And the kids said they'd seen the hairy hands, and after that, several people saw it, and then people had accidents there. I know someone doing an accident there as well. Uh, so I suppose legends maybe they start and then they take a life of
Mm,
their own.
yeah.
Certainly. Lou, you say that you have a friend who had an accident on that stretch of road.
Yeah, he was the wife of my former boss. Like about 20 years ago, I worked in a hotel, the Grosvenor Hotel in Torquay, who you may remember
Oh,
from the TV series, yeah? Uh, and the wife of the owner, before the series was shot, she was a Spanish lady, and she had an accident there, and she said she lost control of the car when it happened. And she was convinced that it was the hairy hands. Obviously she didn't see a hand, but I think she said, of course, he's got to be that.
hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we return back to France and we hear a voice singing. Could
Oh
this
God.
from a local person in the near vicinity?
So that came, well, again, it was really early in the morning. So, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. Uh, I think it was the famous 2:20 actually, when we always said things happen at 2:20 in the morning. Uh, and it was my friend's partner who heard this little boy go around the room, and he heard the footsteps. So back to footsteps again. And I think there was one occasion when he kind of shook the curtains as well, or if he saw the curtains shake. Uh, and that really traumatized him. Um, he didn't wake her up for some reason. He just sat there in bed petrified. Uh, and then, the next morning he told her about it. Now, he was, um, when I first met him, he bought a house in Cessny and he was doing the house up again. And he said he heard some people talking in German outside the house once. And then he found some German coins from, when the Nazis were in France, some Third Reich coins. So I think he had a background of already having had a paranormal experience. Uh, then when he went to the house, there was two occasions when, he saw things. So there was that night when they heard that little boy singing. For some reason, he said it was a little boy. When you hear a child singing, a boy or a girl's voice aren't that dissimilar.
Hmm.
But in his head, he said no, he saw that immediately as a little boy. And it was in the room when that little lad, Jacques, died in the 1960s, which he didn't know about. Um, so that's the first experience he had. The second one, for some reason, he wasn't scared because he went to sleep in the room next door, and he saw a chair being dragged across the floor and everything. Um, and the door kept opening, so he tried to block it with the table, and the door pushed the table. And apparently he said, "Oh, I just accepted that it's a haunted house and fine with it," which I find crazy, really. because that was some serious manifestation. So yes, that's the situation with the little boy who could, I don't know. And they had a little boy after that, which is crazy. She was pregnant at the time.
And regarding the experiences of your godson, the very
Mm,
early ones, you stated that he had no idea of a potential haunting because
yes.
his mother hadn't told him anything.
Yeah.
Is it possible that he might have accessed her diaries or overheard some discussions that planted the seed in his mind that I live in a haunted house?
He was very little and when it started. Like he couldn't read or anything. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's only now that he's just started looking into stuff in the attic or things like that. He's never really did that before. Um, Recently, like he called me, he said, "Oh, I found that," and I thought, "Ah, all right then." Uh, but yeah, he wasn't particularly interested in that in the in the past at the time. Um, Now, he could have overheard stuff because, that's a total possibility. Because sometimes when he was little, we'd mention what happened. I mean, ghost is a big part of our life, yeah, because he went on for so long, and I was that's something I saw and that I shared with her. In a way, it's still there. Even when there's no manifestation, we often talk about ghosts. He's there, which probably isn't a good thing because that keeps him alive. That's kind of how I see it. Uh, so it is possible that he heard something, but the thing is, he's got no idea of the extent of it, and she always made a point of not telling him. His dad hasn't told him anything. I don't know. I suppose, yeah, it is possible that he'd overheard something, but the things he's seen and experience, a lot of them are the same as what happened when we were young, like the knocks, the things disappearing or falling from the shelves and things like that. That's that's the same thing as we had. But then there's been more things. He's seen more shadows than oops, sorry. He's seen more shadow than my friend has seen.
And was your friend religious when she was growing up? When
I've,
she was
I've, she's completely anti-clerical. She's a typical French person. She's not baptized, and she was making a point all through her childhood that she wasn't baptized. um, yeah, it's weird because you'd think with so much experience of the unexplained, she would believe in something, but she doesn't like organized religion. Uh, it's something that she's very dismissive of. Uh, Although they did try to go and see a priest because I suppose that's the first logical port of call when you are faced with things like that. Because of popular culture, because of like Catholic heritage, I suppose.
I wonder when the mother used holy water and
Yeah,
seemed to have a positive effect.
yeah.
Did that make your friend think, oh, maybe there is something in the power of this holy water?
Well, yeah, I think that's probably why they went to see the priest afterwards, and didn't get any help. Do you hear a lot about that, Hugh? About uh, people using religious objects or holy water in cases like this, and it's being effective.
Yes, very much so. And not in a religious context, yes, but often in a very secular situation. People practicing magic. If you look into the whys and wherefores of ritual magic, there are two main uh, two main requirements that must be met. First of all, is the ownership of what they call a tag object, I think the name is, and that is something which links uh, the magician, the operator, if you like, with that which is being operated on, be it a situation, a person, an event, whatever. Um, and the theory, if there is such a theory, is that uh, to the people around about, it's symbolic. It imbues the holy water, if you like, with that that power of
Mm.
obtaining the desired object. But it needn't be so. What it can do very, very easily, and we discussed this in and out over the series, what it can do, of course, is to heighten the power of suggestion. And we know, we've been discussing it this morning at great length, how such stimulation, how such um, ideas, how such imagination can cause these things to happen. So literally, the holy water need not have a religious context at all. It is just something to relate to events which has some meaning to at least one of them.
I'm not sure I'm following you. So
Right,
explain that a different way.
right. Um, I could replace that holy water by, I don't know, a hot cross bun, shall we say?
Okay.
And I can get that effect because the hot cross bun means something to the person who's giving it as a gift, shall we say,
Right.
and the person who receives it. It's uh,
Yes.
like Holy Communion. The Eucharist is precisely that.
Yes.
Here is the body of Christ. This will do all you want, and you don't have to believe it. But the fact that you are being handed something which is alleged to work miracles, it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. Absolutely. Because, it's you take something, you make it sacred. In magic, we do that all the time. You don't have
Yes,
to have the approval of the church or a particular religious body.
precisely. Yes,
You
indeed.
imbue whatever with power, and that makes it powerful. Yeah, you consecrate
Yes,
it. So I suppose you're right when you said instead of holy water, she could have used Coca-Cola. If she believed it was going to stop, and she'd given it in her head the power of doing this, it probably would have
yes.
worked as well. I mean, I suppose you see that with saints as well. If you in the Catholic Church, you do things with saints, you ask favors from saints, and it
Oh,
works.
yes. Oh,
It
yes.
works because you believe in it.
That's right. The go-between. The go-between. Very useful as saints.
Now, I'd be interested to see if you heard of other people of other faiths, like Muslim or Hindu, for instance, who had hauntings in their house, and what did they use? Instead of holy water, what did they use? They put pages of the Quran like in the on the door, or do you
Yes.
come across other faiths and how they deal with
No,
paranormal
I
phenomena?
haven't personally. No, I haven't. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me, and I do believe this is something more to look out more for. Whole research project all of its own. There.
Because
Def
I know my friends used to go out with a guy from Tunisia, and he told her quite a few things. Like they would use the Quran. Um, she would say, "Oh, if someone's in a coma, they said they read the Quran over him, and if he wakes up, then that's fine. If he doesn't, they bury it."
I don't think
And
I
she
put
was
my trust.
horrified.
I don't think I put my trust in that quite so implicitly.
But he seemed to say that in traditional, like, folk practice, I suppose, they would read the Quran over several situation or things that they thought were
Yeah.
haunted by jinns. But I'd like to see how that manifests in this country. Like you say, people who are of immigrant background, how they've adopted their reaction, how they've adapted, sorry, their reaction to paranormal phenomena with their native faith.
Well, I think we see it already to an extent in Judaism and its derivative in Christianity. Um, the the Bible, as we know, the Old Testament anyway, is simply an invented history of the Judean
Yeah.
faith, if you like. That it's a history they would have liked to have happened, but in fact, there's not even archaeologists tell us any physical evidence that the historic temple ever existed.
Yeah. And Esther, the book of Esther, is basically the story of goddess Ishtar, just pimped up, like, and
Yes,
made to be Judaic. So it takes its source in loads of different other cultures of the area,
but it
or
works
cultures
for
that
them. It works for them. That's the point.
yeah, exactly. I think, and I suppose that's why, people talk about placebo effect, but in magic, the power of intent is pretty much everything,
Mm,
It's one of the biggest factors in making your magic successful.
Just before we sum up, something that's been niggling away at me is I still find it very strange that the family didn't move out of the property despite all these horrific things going on. I still find that strange.
Me too. And to this day, everybody said to her, "This house is is so badly falling in disrepair. You need to get it, get rid of it and have another one built, and it would cost you as much money as repairing it." And she will not do it. And her brother said, "You are prisoners from this house because you could have moved 100 times, except that, of course, when we were young, she had all these animals, and there was no way they were going to get rid of the animals. They were very protective of animals that were part of the family, so that would have been difficult. But I think the crux of the problem is that it is a family home, and her mom was so attached to it. In her head, it was like, we don't have to move. That things got to leave, and that's how she kind of saw it. Um, and but it's bizarre even to this day that they're so attached to it. Like my godson said to her a while back, he said, "Oh, mom, what's going to happen when I die? Like, who's going to live in the house?" And I thought, you're 10. Why are you thinking like this?
Mm.
It's almost like the place has a grip on them.
Yes, I can relate very briefly, if I may, a comment made by a colleague who is writing yet another book on the Enfield Poltergeist. And he says it is significant, in his opinion, that in a lot of poltergeist cases, what do they come up with? What do they want? They want to be rehoused. They want the council to get them a new home to get out of this. At least that is their excuse.
Yeah.
It's haunted or whatever. And this didn't happen in with the Hodgson family in Enfield. It was quite the opposite, in fact. Mrs. Hodgson, the mother, like you say, absolutely forbade any thought of moving. And the reason was similar. It's because their home to them, rather than being a jail, a dungeon, was in fact a saving grace, because all of their family were psychologically afflicted in some way, and some of them very seriously indeed. They were in care in psychiatric assistance and so on. And this gentleman who's writing the book, he said that is very significant as to why she wanted to stay there, and under no circumstances would she be moved.
Yeah, so there was external factors which made them stay there. Yeah, but even though when we were growing up, my friend's family were poor, they had all these animals. To this day, she could now move if she wanted to, and she
Yes,
doesn't want
indeed.
to.
Mm.
And she's adamant. I mean, she's a bit bloody-minded in the most lovely way, but now she's adamant she won't leave. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. You could have a flat, it would be cheaper, you would be in a better situation. Doesn't want to move. And she doesn't, she knows I've talked to her about it, and I've told her what we're just saying now. And now she won't budge.
No.
And the fact our kid thinks that, he could, again, he's at his age, he could dream of living in California or, doing this and that. But no, he sees himself living in that house until he dies. It's crazy.
Lee, I want, before you sum up, excuse me, could I be permitted an observation?
Of course.
Thank you. In the last meeting, and as long as I can remember before that, I always exhort researchers to write things down, make a diary. Even if we can't explain it at the moment, then researchers of the future will find it very helpful to look back on this. And for this reason, if this reason alone, we ought to be very thankful to Lee, Lee as well, but to Lou for providing such fruitful material for us to consider in this series. Now, I've been looking at this. I say to people, look at the evidence and see if you can see a pattern. And if we can't, as I've just mentioned, certainly people in the future might do so. Now, I've tried here to find a pattern. I've even summarized the evidence in different ways. I've looked through it, and here's what stands out to me. Here's the factor that I think we should be looking at if we can't see what joins them. What is missing? There's something here that's missing. What is it that is uncommon to all of these? What hasn't been reported that might be relevant? Now, earlier on, Lou said we looked at the case, the father, your question, the father might be responsible, and we now don't think that is the case. But is there anything else? Is there anything that might jog our memories, give us some new insight into this? And I wonder, Lee, whether our participants might take this on as a bit of homework, look at the evidence again and see what isn't reported, what isn't recorded.
There's one thing we haven't talked about, which I added to the notes I sent you, is the grandmother. Because the grandmother is the one who's absent of the picture, and yet she's a source of conflict in that family. Because
Yes,
my friend's the daughter of a second marriage, which the grandmother never accepted.
yes.
And the grandmother was wealthy. She never given them a penny, even when they were in dire straits. And she always rejected my friend very strongly. My friend didn't find out she had a half brother until she was about 12, because there was such a taboo around his first marriage. And last time we talked, you were talking about family conflicts in a
Yes.
poltergeist situation. And after you told me that, I thought, hello. And the grandmother never visited the family, but she was the malevolent presence in the background.
All right. Yes, thank you for that. Indeed.
Um, so I don't know if, our viewers can think of that, but yes, it'd be interesting to see. Is there anything else? And of course, there was the cases in the area which had similarities as well. And I don't know if that, can be taken into account as well. Is there you know, do cases in similar areas tend to share common things? Like we talked about the blood in the Saint-Quentin house, for instance, which I mistakenly last time said he was in Armentières, but he wasn't. Uh, that's another case of bleeding house, and you said that you haven't heard of that before. So why is it that we've got similar cases in, at 100 kilometers distance?
Plenty there to guide our thoughts. Thank you, Lou.
No problem.
Yes. So to sum up, obviously we've had a look at the vast majority of occurrences, and we've considered the pros and the cons in terms of a supernatural explanation. I must say I'm still tantalized by the idea that there could be some mass hysteria at play in an anxious environment.
Mm.
But also, could there have been some kind of poisoning, either through ingestion? And this may sound flippant and almost facetious, but Lou, would you know if maybe the family were harvesting their own mushrooms in the area?
Oh God, no. It's like I do a lot of foraging, and they've always been like, no, 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 no. Every time you eat a mushroom, you're going to die, and it's bizarre. Like loads of people think all mushrooms are poisonous. They're not. There's only a handful which are really dangerous. Uh,
Yes.
but yeah, there's no way they would eat something from the wild. It's weird. It's not something that they were into at all. You mentioned ergot, did you? In the notes you sent me. But
Yes.
ergot makes you so ill, and it can kill you as well. It's really serious, ergot poisoning. So that's something we can't at all look as a possibility. Um, I think when you talk about mass hysteria, I'd say that's a possibility, definitely. When we look at all the things we've talked about, if there was going to be an explanation, or other than, paranormal, or other than spirit, that's kind of how I see it. That is, I wouldn't reject that one. That after all the things you put forward, that's the one I'm most keen to say. Yeah, there might be something of that in there,
Okay. So
because
that
that presents itself in so many different ways. If you look at all the types of mass hysteria there is, to what extent are poltergeists created by fear, and then and that creates, like you say, a form of mass hysteria. But again, because I've seen things, I don't know.
it could well be that what we are dealing with here is a genuine poltergeist, whether that's a separate entity or whether it has been generated by the subconscious mind. of
Yeah.
or more of the occupants?
I'd say overall, it's a bit like a bit of both. I'd be inclined to say it's a bit of both, because when I look at all the things we've talked about today, it's clear that when people believe in something, they make it real, don't they? And then whether that's a legend or a placebo effect or anything like that, there is always this case of people believe in it, up, then it happens, and then it takes a life of its own. Yeah. So from ID to manifestation, there is a clear road, if that makes sense. So yes, I think if there's one thing we need to remember from here is that people's feelings and will has an action on what's happening around them, and that can take several forms, and maybe paranormal activities is that.
Hugh, could we have a final word from you?
I hope it's not a final word, Lee.
Well,
We don't want that either.
for this podcast.
But simply this. Thank you, Lou, for being so generous with your information to us. And thank you, Lee, for broadcasting it in the most acceptable way, which I think will do enormous give enormous benefit to researchers working in this field. And we commend a lot of these ideas to them for future evaluation and development.
Please, pop my notes into your files, and you can put them online if you've got a particular online data bank. That's
I don't know.
I mean, just make sure you keep that in your archives, and if you want to share them with other investigators, and then that's fine, because me and my
I see
friend,
what you mean. Yes, right. Okay, thank you for that. I understand.
quite eager to get as many opinions on it as we can.
Excellent.
Lou Hotchkiss-Knives and Dr. Hugh Pincott, thank you very much. It's been a fantastic story, and we've all thoroughly enjoyed it. And we will see you again for another edition of the Shadowcast.